I guess for the first little while after Margot was born, like if anyone asked me about having a second baby, I felt physically sick. I was like, I can't, oh my God, I can't even think about it because I still had a lot of birth trauma. So I knew that there were things I knew that I wanted to have another child, but I knew that there were certain things that were going to have to happen if I was going to go there.
Hello everyone and welcome back to No Place Like Home. I'm here with Larissa and the wonderful Naomi, who you may know from her business and Instagram, COCOON by Naomi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
For those of you who don't know Naomi, she's come all the way from New South Wales to be here. We're very, very happy. And today we're going to talk a little bit about your motherhood journey. You have 2 children and you've had 2 very different experiences, and I'd love you to share a little bit about that with us.
Sure. Where do I begin?
Where do you begin? I mean, pregnant with Margot.
Yeah, I was pregnant with my first child, who's now 7.5, which kind of blows my mind.
Time goes quickly, doesn't it? They say that.
They say that, but you don't realise it until suddenly they're these like almost tweens who want to put makeup on. Anyway, so yeah, I was pregnant with her, living in LA with my husband, and I was working as a freelance journalist, which is what I've been doing for the past decade before that, working in women's magazines. And at that point I was interviewing celebrities and doing travel stories,
being
living
flown to
very
interview
best
J-Lo.
Going off to interview Jennifer Lawrence, doing all the junkets and all the hotels and flying off to Vegas to
that's very glam.
It was very fun and glam, and looking back it feels like sort of an extended honeymoon period because we got married and then moved to LA. So anyway, got pregnant, and we decided we'd move back to Australia, in part because we didn't want to raise our kids in America. Trump had just got the nomination over there. We were like, oh, this feels like, don't know about this.
Okay.
And partly because our families are here. My husband's family is all in Tassie, but my family was in Sydney.
Right.
And I came back at 28 weeks pregnant and thought, well, my family's here. I've got a house. Like, I've got a nice nursery sorted out. I've got my Pinterest board with cute outfits on it.
What else could you need?
What more do I need? Didn't know. I knew about the 4th trimester, but purely from the baby side of things. You know, like the babies need to be in a womb-like space and they like shushing. I had no idea about what I would need at all.
So I think, that resonates as well. I think I was a bit more focused on the baby than what I needed.
And the first 40 days wasn't out then, was it? Because it wasn't out when I had Louis either. And
well, it came out in 2016. I had Margot in June 2016. It did come out in 2016, but I didn't get my hands on it until she was about 6 months old.
Okay.
And I got my hands on it because I had other friends who were having babies, but I was one of the first. One of my good friends from school had a baby 5 weeks ahead of me. But other than that, I didn't really know anyone close to me who had babies. I hadn't seen it up close in all the beauty and brutality of it all. So I had my daughter. It was a tricky birth, but more so I was just absolutely shocked by how full on and intense
relentless
postpartum was. Yeah, like it was brutal. And it was also magical, and it's just like the miracle of life. Like my husband and I would be like, oh my, but I felt like I had some birth trauma. I remember feeling every day, every afternoon, as the sun would, like it was winter, the days would start getting darker sooner. And I'd have this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach about what the night was going to bring.
I know. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I used to have those thoughts too. Yep.
It feels like it's a common thing. I've had a few people say that. And I just felt scared all the time. And I couldn't understand. I think I was a bit arrogant about assuming that I'd be fine. Like my mum had been a midwife in the 70s, and then became kind of a de facto midwife to her community. And I was always forever accompanying her as a kid to take food to people and help with breastfeeding stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh yeah, like I've held plenty of babies, I'll be fine. And I wasn't fine, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have that reassurance around me that it was okay to not know what I was doing. And it was okay that it was hard, and it was okay that it was a very steep learning curve. It was more... Yeah, I mean, I had some of that from a beautiful home visiting midwife, but, you know, I had my mum saying weird things to me about breastfeeding, like, oh, maybe your milk's not good, or, you know, just things that would send me into a full spiral. And my daughter was classic and has stayed that way. Her temperament is very, what's the word? Like, she's just a tricky personality, and she's also just needs a lot from you. She needs a lot, and she did that as a newborn, and she still does that now. And she just needed to be on me all the time.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why. Like, I'd read the books. You wrap up your baby and you put them down drowsy,
Drowsy but awake.
and then they go to sleep. And why wasn't my baby doing? It must be me. I'm doing something wrong. I'm fucking it up.
Yeah.
And that, so I ended up calling Panda, being diagnosed with postnatal anxiety, and it all kind of eventually got a lot better. But it was a really hard moment in time for me to go, oh my, just very destabilizing to assume that this is all going to be fine, and then like, oh my gosh, this is actually really hard, and I thought that I would be enjoying this, and I'm actually just feeling terrified. It wasn't until she was about 4 months old that I went, oh, okay, this feels a little bit more like the maternity leave I thought I was going to be having. Yeah.
I have a big question about that time.
Tell me.
Because I know you're really big on filling your freezer.
Now.
Did you do that when you're pregnant with Margot? No.
Yes,
No,
I did nothing. I did nothing. I mean, we did move into our new house when I was 31 weeks pregnant. So there was a lot going on, but that's really no excuse. I think I froze maybe like a bolognese.
Yeah.
I think that there was like 1 or 2 meals in the freezer.
You just can't anticipate though, like unless someone tells you, and even when people tell you, you don't always want to listen either, because you think, I'll be fine. Yeah. No, it's me. I love cooking. I'll be fine.
Yeah, and you live in this hyper-individualistic culture where it's like, you'll be fine. Do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Just, get it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when did you become a postpartum doula? What turned that light switch on? Like, where was the...
Well, the light switch got turned on early, but I didn't change careers for a while. So I think reading the first 40 days, I remember first feeling amazed by all these cultural practices that were so nourishing for new mothers, and the food. Like, I love food, and just hearing about the functional food and how like food can really help with healing and with mood and with all these things. I was like, oh my God. And then I got really off. So I was like, why the are we not doing this here?
Yeah.
Why have we lost this entirely? And I felt so ripped off. And not just for myself, but for everyone. I just got ragey about it. And so I think that was when I started really getting interested in it. And there was a page in there, I remember, about postpartum doulas and how they can support. And I was like, didn't know, like I'd heard about doulas, but postpartum doulas
this has been a common
were a thing.
theme. It's like postpartum doulas are really only, when we had our children, they weren't, they existed, but it wasn't a thing. I had a birth doula, but there was no postpartum doula.
No, not at all. When I was setting up my business, which I launched at the beginning of 2019, there were no other postpartum doulas in Sydney.
Wow.
At all. And now, there's plenty, which is great. But yeah, they just weren't. So it took me from... I guess end of 2016, I went back to work part-time at Marie Claire magazine, and then I changed jobs, and I was working at Stella magazine and on a 1-year contract, maternity leave contract. And it was then that I was like, okay, if I don't change careers, and my daughter was 2 at that point, I'm going to regret this. So I decided I'll give myself, I started, while I was in that job, I started training to become a postpartum doula. I started setting up my website, doing all of those kind of things. I was also ghostwriting a book at the time. It was a very full-on year. And then I sort of said, I'll give myself 6 months and I can always freelance, right? If I need to, I'll give myself 6 months, got a little bit of money saved. And if it doesn't work out, I'll go back and get another media job. But fortunately, it worked out.
Yeah.
So, 2019, which is, it's coming up to 5 years, which is
Wow.
crazy.
And then how did your experience with Margot inform your second pregnancy with Cormac? Because you had a very different birth.
Well, yeah, I
Very
actually,
different postpartum.
yeah, I, for the
Cormac,
first,
what a great name.
thanks, it's Irish. I guess for the first little while after Margot was born, like if anyone asked me about having a second baby, I felt physically sick. I was like, I can't, oh my God, I can't even think about it because I still had a lot of birth trauma. So I knew that there were things that I knew that I wanted to have another child, but I knew that there were certain things that were going to happen if I was going to go there. And one of those things was continuity of care with a known midwife. At that point, I was still thinking hospital birth. And also a ton of postpartum support. I was like, Michael, I'm going to need a doula. I'm going to need a postpartum doula. I'm going to need massages. I'm going to and we need to start saving now because otherwise we are not having another child. So there's a 4-year age gap between my children. And because in part that was me wanting to take the time to recover and get ready.
Heal,
So I started getting ready, before I got pregnant, really, and getting everything in place.
That. I mean, imagine if that was the norm.
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I mean, first time around, that would have seemed so foreign to me, and it was only because I'd had that experience that I knew. Oh, okay. You know, maybe if I'd had a great experience first time around, I wouldn't have felt the need to put in that much prep. But I was just like, I'm a bit of a control freak, and I was just like, right. I know that there's so many things that you can't control, but I knew that there were things that you could control. So I decided to have a home birth with Cormac, and that was a game changer. And it also was in 2020. So with COVID being unleashed, it meant that I didn't have to deal with the hospital system and all of that crap that sort of everyone had to deal with, all the changes and just terrible. And I just filled my freezer like no tomorrow. I asked a friend to set up a meal train for us. We were saving money so that I could have in-home massages, acupuncture, osteo, all the things. I had a birth doula, I had a postpartum doula, I had all the things.
All the things.
Amazing.
Can we talk just very briefly about how your home birth turned into an accidental free birth?
Yes, it did.
I don't know how relevant it is, but it's fun story.
Well, in a nutshell, I went to 42 weeks, and my midwife came and she was like, you know, we don't have to do anything, but if you want, I can, you know, check you and we can do a bit of a stretch and sweep. And, you know, thought about it and so, okay, decided to do it. So I had stretch and sweep, and then I was already 3 centimetres dilated. I'd already been having crampy sensations for like 2 weeks. So my body was clearly ready to go. She went back to her home in the Blue Mountains. We were in the inner west of Sydney. So that's like an hour away. Yeah. And she'd said to me previously, she was like, don't mess around with telling me, you know, when it's happening, because second births are the ones that if I miss any births, it's the second births. And so it was like 9 o'clock and I was like, oh yeah, things are kicking off, but I'm going to go to bed and try and get some sleep. And all through the night I was labouring in bed quite comfortably with my comb, pressing, like you couldn't have taken the comb away from me. I was pressing into my hand. My husband's timing contractions. And then my waters broke at about, I think, 4:35. And
what do you mean when you were saying about the comb?
You know, like do you know the thing about the comb where if you put the teeth of a comb into, apparently this is like an acupressure point. And it's also that theory of if you're feeling a sensation in another part of your body, it takes away
from the other one. Okay.
I was loving that comb so much. Like you couldn't have taken it away from me.
You can buy birth combs now specifically for birth.
Thing. I just used the plastic comb that my husband has.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
I've never heard about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was great. Like
amazing.
TENS machine batteries conked out after a couple of hours and I was like, I don't care. Just give me the comb. Yeah. Like, fuck the TENS.
Right.
Yeah. So my waters broke and it started really ramping up. But my midwife, Ben Michael, was texting her and he was like, things are ramping up. She's coping okay, but things are ramping up. She's like, well, let's just see what happens as the sun comes up.
No.
That was a bad call. And I also, that was still, I realized I was in my people pleasing mode because I knew, I was like, what? No, it's not just labour's establishing. Like I'm here, but I didn't want to be.
Do you think it was self-doubt too? Like, did you question
yes.
yourself?
Well, yes, because I was like, well, she's the expert. And she's like, sounds like labour could be establishing. So I was like, oh my God, really? God, please no, like let it be. You know, it was full on. Anyway, he was born by 6 a.m. I was like, no, they need to get here. And he was born at 7 in the morning, and my mum, who was strictly not allowed to be in my zone, was the one who, my husband caught him in our bathroom and handed him over to my mum, who he had a nuchal cord, so she's slipping and freaking out because my brother had anyway, she was bringing not great energy into it. So it was not the birth, not the water birth with my midwife, and my doula didn't make it until 10 minutes after the
so
birth.
no one ended up making it?
All that support was
But
it was great.
Were you in the bathroom?
Yeah,
Like
in the bathroom, holding onto the sink, not on the toilet,
Not on the
just
toilet.
standing,
Yeah.
holding on. I tried to sit on the toilet because I'd heard, that's a great,
Yeah.
I didn't even believe that the baby was coming until I was in the bathroom. I could hear my husband handing over our daughter to my mum at the front door, and I'm going, like, do I need to poo again? No, that's a head that I can feel. Anyway, so yeah.
Wow.
And I was born. So it was not as I planned, but it was amazing and empowering and super powerful and
I just got full body
hectic.
goosebumps.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh my God, you did that. You're amazing. It was good. Wow.
It was good.
And then you got the most beautiful photos of afterwards because your doula came over and took photos of you all.
She got there 10 minutes after he was born. So she was there for the placenta, the birth placenta was full on for me. And, there and made me bone broth and toast and, all of that good stuff. And
And your postpartum second time round was beautiful? Was it everything that you had set up? And
it was. It was everything, not just that I'd set up, but from what what I had absorbed from interviewing people on my like experts on my podcast and talk, like I was like, this is great for me because I'm getting an education here and talking to clients and seeing what worked for them because, I'd been looking after people after they had their babies. So I picked up, I cherry-picked things
from everyone. Yeah.
I co-slept from day one, which I'd been really scared to do with my daughter until she was about a month old. And then once we did it, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I just do this from the start? We're all getting so much more sleep. So I just did that with him from
How did
day
you
one.
do that, if you don't mind me asking?
With my daughter or my son?
With your
the first?
son.
Yeah, my son. I just had him in the bed.
Yeah.
I had him in the bed. I knew about safe bed sharing principles. My mattress was firm.
Yeah.
He was next to me. I was breastfeeding. I had all my right pajamas. My hair was back,
Yeah, all of the things.
all of the things. We just set ourselves up to do it safely. And I knew by that point, well, I'd done it before, but also I just had it reinforced over all the conversations that I'd had, about all the research that I read, about all of the studies, that it is safe when you take out the risk factors.
Yeah.
So I felt comfortable to do that. And I don't know how much of it is his temperament and his sleep needs or my confidence and how I just went with it from day dot. But I mean, he was waking twice a night and that was it, and going straight back to sleep. It was just a totally different situation. I stayed in bed for the most part of 2 weeks.
So good.
It was so good. I had a massage therapist come in and give me massages like 3 days after I gave birth.
Yeah.
I went to osteo the week after I gave birth. Like I just did all things. And the thing is, I also knew, because I'd had that anxiety first time around, I kind of had on speed dial all the people, like therapist, naturopath, like anyone who could give me some herbs or do a therapy session with me, or like I knew that if that happened again,
you had the resources.
Yeah. And it didn't. I'd had a couple of moments where I'm a naturally sort of anxious person, and I had a couple of moments where I found myself feeling that way. But I knew, I talked to my husband. That was another big thing, was like I hadn't communicated well with him the first time around, and the second time I was like, I've got to commit to myself and to him that I will actually tell him what's happening, and not just keep it to myself and try and deal with it myself. And so he knew like what I needed. We talked about that ahead of time, like what will help me feel better. He knew just to send me off to bed to sleep. You know, so yeah, it was an amazing experience, to the point that when my husband went in when I was 6 weeks postpartum to talk to the GP about a vasectomy, I was like, no, wait, because maybe I just want to do it again. And I didn't let him have a vasectomy for about 2 years after that, because I was like, maybe I just want to do this again just so I can have the birth and the postpartum. And then we got to toddlerhood and I'm like, yeah, I remember that I don't want to.
We're done. Child. Toddlers.
That is such a really important thing that you said before about, you know, being true to yourself and communicating. I think that's one of the biggest things.
Being honest with your husband about how you're feeling rather than keeping it to yourself. Is that?
And that
so
honesty
important.
with yourself, that you owe that to yourself to be honest and to have those conversations. And I think that's a really big part. I am too generally an anxious person over, you know, my life. And I think that obviously, you know, perpetuates what sometimes we go through after birth. And yeah, I think that was also my bit of Achilles heel as well. Like I was just like, no, I have to be strong and I can do this and I'm, you know. But in actual fact, it's
stoic.
That stoic kind of never ends up getting us anywhere. And we sort of, the more vulnerable we are, actually, that's where the strength is.
Absolutely.
So much strength and vulnerability.
Yeah. In your postpartum, what do you think the second time round, do you think it was that you were very conscious of planning your postpartum that was the difference? Like obviously your births were very different and then your postpartums were very different. They were almost like
yin yang.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my children are kind of yin and yang as well. I feel like it was just the cocktail of all the things. Like I definitely, if I'd had a tricky birth, it probably wouldn't have been as good. If I hadn't planned, it wouldn't have been as good. But it was all those things really helped. But I guess what I kind of kept coming back to was you can't control how you, I mean, I was trying to control how I birthed, and I thought that I was going to birth a certain way, and I was humbled yet again that, you know, it's all about just surrendering to how it's going to unfold. And even though it was an amazing experience, it taught me, you know, I'm not in control of birth, but I am in control of how much food's in my freezer. And the fact that I have, you know, felt a bit awkward and embarrassed and asked a friend to ask other friends to make meals for me. You know, I can save money and I was putting just like $10-20 aside a week for massages, like from a year prior to that. You know, like I knew that there were things
that's in your control.
I could control. There are things that I didn't know how breastfeeding would go. I'd struggled with breastfeeding first time around until things clicked into place. I had a really hard start. This time around, things clicked into place immediately. He was just a different feeder. But again, like you don't know. You don't know. Yeah. But there are certain things you can do to give yourself the best shot at postpartum.
I just wanted to add, you know, everything that we're talking about, we had Eufern on a few weeks ago, and she was saying that she was at the One Fine Baby Expo, and she's got a postpartum, she's got dry foods and like herbs, TCM-based products, and no first-time mums cared. The second time mums were the ones who were like, thank goodness you're here, thank goodness you're here. And it's a really common theme, I think, that it's that whole you don't know what you don't know.
No. And we live in a culture where we're marketed about products and products,
the commodification of motherhood.
Yes. And it's all about prams and carriers. And, you know, I'm not saying those things don't matter, but no one's really talking about the mothers. I don't want to say I don't love the word spiritual, but it's kind of like her very personal needs beyond, like, I know that there's great products out there that you can buy, and I sell products too. Like, it's not like I don't think products can help, but it's almost like you need to go beyond that and think about what are those needs beyond things that you can just,
like, practical needs and emotional needs.
Exactly.
It's that matrescence period, isn't it? It's that transition period that I think we just completely bulldoze over.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even, no one sees it.
And society isn't, mothers are just sort of, unless you're a mum who's spending money on a $2,000 cot, like,
well, I think
that people don't really care. You can't make money on telling people about matrescence.
Yeah,
so
we do that thing of like, it's not, well, you're a mum, so that's just what you are.
Well, you signed up for this. You wanted this, so stop complaining. How do you think it was going to be? And I feel like there's definitely a lot of that from the older generation because they had it really hard. We really
talk about this a lot.
The mother wound.
Oh yeah, and they didn't have, like, my dad. I didn't realize this until he told me recently. When I was born, and my mum had a 36-hour labour with me, he wasn't able to get any time off work. He was able to take 2 days sick leave. There was no, he'd only just started a new role. There was no paid parental leave from the government, and there was nothing about, you could take time off after a partner had a baby in workplaces. Wow. It was just not the done thing in the 80s. So I have a lot of compassion for that generation who looks at us as like this sort of spoiled, privileged.
Bubble wrapped.
Yeah.
Kind of,
But my argument is, well, you survived, and good on you, and I can appreciate that. But does that mean everyone else just has to get through by the skin of their teeth? Exactly. Or can we actually enjoy this experience?
And can we look at how hard it was for us and make sure that it's easier for the next generation?
Exactly.
And it doesn't need to be about all the things.
No.
Like, you actually
it's not about all the, it's support.
It's not.
Well, I think it's support over stuff. Yes, there's stuff that does help.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's support. You will never get too much support. You can have so much stuff and outfits that babies grow out of when they've worn one time, and things that you thought that you need that you never use.
Yeah.
You can drop tons of money on that stuff, but you can never spend too much money or too much time or too much care getting the support that you need. Like, nothing can replace a good IBCLC who can help you if you're struggling when you're breastfeeding. Nothing can replace a postpartum doula who's going to listen to you cry and really support you through that when you're feeling like absolute like that's, and I want to acknowledge that stuff costs money too, but there are ways of doing it without, like, you don't have to spend all the money to get that support either.
But you can also, like, rally the people around you
Absolutely.
that want to buy all of the things and say, actually, just give us money to put towards a postpartum doula.
I was so proud of a friend of mine recently. She's a bit younger than me, and we worked together when I was my last media job, and she saw me going through all the training, and she was sort of excited about one day having babies, and I did a planning session with her and her partner, and she was like, you know what, we're going to do, instead of gifts at the baby shower, we're going to do a postpartum fund. And I saw the email go out, and it was perfectly worded. It was just like, if you'd like to support us, chip in for a cleaner, meal delivery, all of those things that make such a big difference. And people did, and she's had a great postpartum.
And people want to know. I always come back to, people want to know how to help. You just have to tell them how. And if they don't know what to do, they're going to rock up with a onesie that your baby might never wear. But if you say to them, this is what I need, a meal, or I would like money towards my postpartum fund. Yeah. People are always willing to.
Absolutely. People want to help.
And they want.
You just have to tell them how, because culturally we're not told how.
Yeah.
The how is buying the onesie. Mm-hmm. And that is, it's not what it's about.
No. Thank you so much, Naomi. Next time we chat to you, we're going to talk more about COCOON by Naomi.
Can't wait.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.